Welcome, beautiful soul. You're safe here now. Let the weight of the day melt away. This is your time to rest, to breathe, to feel held. You're not alone. You're gently wrapped in warmth, in quiet, in love. Close your eyes and let this story be your lullaby. This one is called From the Garden with Love. The moon hangs low tonight, casting silver ribbons across the quiet earth. Crickets whisper in the bushes, and a breeze stirs the air with the faintest scent of roses, soft, warm, just this side of memory. You walk along a narrow path, the gravel crunching gently beneath your steps. The wooden gate ahead is crooked on its hinges, its once white paint chipped and kissed with moss. Vines reach for it like old friends, eager to wrap you in the past. You pause. The spade in your hand is light, but what you carry in your chest is heavier than any tool. You ease the gate open with a soft creak, stepping through into the garden that once bloomed like a secret only you two shared. Everything looks smaller now, quieter. But maybe that's just how time softens things. Or maybe it's because you're seeing it alone. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding and crouch near the old rose bush by the far wall. The same place you remember burying them. The letters, folded carefully, tied with twine, hidden in a biscuit tin beneath the roots of a rose named Sweet Juliet. Yes, that was your little joke. He'd rolled his eyes at the name, called it aggressively romantic. You'd called him a cynic and kissed the top of his head until he smiled again. Now, the rose bush is a little wild, untended, branches curling like they're searching for something. Maybe they're looking for you. You brush aside fallen petals and the damp crunch of old mulch, feeling the familiar resistance of the earth. The spade cuts in easily. It's soft here, always was. You dig slowly, carefully. The dirt has that particular smell, doesn't it? Half rain, half memory. And just like that, your heart stutters. Because there it is, the tin. Rust-flecked, dented, but still intact. You lift it like it might crumble in your hands. You sit on the mossy stone path, legs tucked awkwardly beneath you. You're too old for this, you mutter. Your knees agree, offering a creak loud enough to alert any passing squirrels. You chuckle softly to yourself. He'd have said you're being dramatic. The tin clicks open, and the scent that wafts out is faint, but unmistakable. Lavender sachets, ink, and the ache of time. You touch the first letter, still folded in its envelope. No address, just his name. The one that, even now, you can't say out loud without your voice catching. You hesitate. It's been years since you last read these. Maybe a lifetime. But the garden is quiet, and the moon is patient. So you begin. The paper is soft with age, the ink slightly smudged from the day you cried writing it. You remember the pen, how it scratched across the page like it, too, wanted to say something important. You read aloud, softly, the words tumbling into the night air like petals. He'd gone away that summer. Not far, just far enough. A job that didn't quite fit, in a city that didn't quite love him back. You missed him with a ferocity that surprised you, like a part of your skin had gone with him. You wrote him letters every week. This one had been the first. You'd written it while sitting exactly where you are now, cross-legged beside the rose bush, chewing the end of your pen and trying not to sound too desperate. You made me tea this morning, you read aloud, even though I was still asleep. You're not here now, but the cup is still on the table and the tea's gone cold. I didn't touch it. I'm saving it for you. I don't know why. I think it's just easier to pretend you're coming back tomorrow. You sigh. You forgot how young you were when you wrote that. Young and melodramatic, and so deeply, ridiculously in love. You never got that letter. Not directly, anyway. You buried it instead, promising yourself you'd read it to him when he came back. He did, but you never did. Life got busy, then it got harder, then it just moved on. There's a pause in your chest now, like your heart is flipping through its own memory album. You glance around the garden, at the crooked arbor where he strung up fairy lights one winter, and they sagged so low a squirrel got tangled in them. At the bird bath he claimed was haunted. At the bench you painted together, terribly, while tipsy on boxed wine. Everywhere there's him. And somehow, in this moment, in this garden, you feel like maybe you're not entirely alone. You place the letter gently in your lap and reach into the tin again. Another envelope waits beneath the first. And beneath that, more still. Edges soft, corners curled. You run your fingers over them, like the pages of a life you're just now remembering how to read. The roses rustle above you, a breeze, maybe, or maybe just the past shifting its weight beside you. Either way, you stay seated, heart cracked open like the tin, ready for whatever memory comes next. You slide the next letter free, careful not to tear its time-softened edges. The handwriting on the envelope is yours, though slightly younger, loopier, like it hadn't yet learned restraint. It smells faintly of rose oil and graphite, your old habit of penciling first drafts before going over them in pen. You were always afraid of getting the feelings wrong on the first try. You unfold it, and the garden seems to lean in. The words begin. Do you remember the first time we met? And just like that, you do. You're back in your 20s, wearing a rain-drenched coat, standing awkwardly inside a tiny bookshop near the train station. You'd ducked in to escape a sudden downpour. He was already there, leafing through the poetry section with the kind of concentration that should be illegal in wet weather. His hair was soaked, glasses fogged, and his boots left squeaky prints on the tile. And still, somehow, he looked unfazed, annoyingly serene. You were charmed and annoyed in equal measure. You'd shaken out your umbrella and nearly smacked a whole shelf of romance novels onto the floor. He'd looked up at the commotion, saw you struggling, and said, "You know, they call that a meet cute in the movies." Dry, deadpan, and delivered with the exact level of smugness that made you want to throw a dictionary at him. Or marry him. You hadn't yet decided. The garden hums with quiet, and a few fireflies float lazily through the lavender. You let the letter rest on your knees for a moment. Your legs are starting to fall asleep, but you don't dare move. It feels like if you shift too much, the spell might break. You glance around. That bench by the honeysuckle bush, that's where you sat with him after your third date, sharing a bag of almonds and a half-warm thermos of soup, because he'd insisted picnics were more romantic than restaurants. You'd been freezing, uncomfortable, and completely smitten. He'd offered you his scarf and called himself a gentleman. You called him a goof. Both were true. You pick up the spade, brushing dirt gently from the edge of the tin. Beneath the second letter, you find a dried rose. Flat, fragile, pressed between two envelopes. You smile. You remember that rose. You'd tucked it into his coat pocket after that fourth date, when he walked you home in the rain again and tried to kiss your forehead, but got your eyebrow instead. You told him, if you're going to miss, at least do it romantically. He'd laughed, embarrassed. You'd kissed him back properly then, right on the mouth, rain and all. The garden seems to pulse with that memory. Wet cobblestones, his hand on your waist, the taste of peppermint and rainwater. You'd been so unsure of everything back then, except him. Somehow, always him. You take another breath and glance at the sky. The moon's shifted slightly, higher now, watching from between the clouds. Somewhere, an owl hoots softly, probably judging your nostalgic monologue. You raise an eyebrow. "Mind your business," you mutter. The owl is unmoved. With a small sigh, you fold the letter gently and place it back into the tin. The rose petal flutters slightly as you close the lid again, but you catch it just in time, pressing it carefully between your palms before tucking it into your cardigan pocket. You lean back, letting your spine crack in protest against the stone path. "We were ridiculous," you whisper to no one in particular. "Ridiculous and perfect." A pause. Then you correct yourself, smiling faintly. "Perfect for us." And for now, the garden agrees. You open the tin again and find the third letter resting like an old song, one whose first notes you already know by heart. The envelope is pale yellow, edges curled like a wave mid-break, and the paper inside feels almost warm, as if it still holds the memory of your hands. This one takes you back to your first summer apart. It had been your idea, oddly enough. You both had things to chase. He had that writing workshop by the coast, and you had your grant to research community gardens in the city. It was just 2 months, a blink. But when you're in love, even a blink feels like exile. You unfold the letter, and as your eyes skim the words, you're swept into that soft ache again. You're sitting in your tiny apartment above the bakery, every surface scented with sugar and yeast, the fan clacking in the window like it's arguing with the air. You'd sit at the kitchen table after work, sore from digging garden beds all day, and write him long letters in the orange light of sunset. I miss you most in the small spaces, the letter begins, in the quiet between songs, in the way I reach for your mug instead of mine. It's not grand or poetic, it's just constant. You snort gently. You were always better at noticing the tiny things. He was the big picture guy, metaphors, sweeping ideas. You were the one who remembered where the spoons lived. That summer, you'd written nearly every evening. He'd write back too, though not as often. You teased him about it, called him a slacker. He'd defend himself by saying he was crafting you a novel instead. You never saw the novel. But you did get one very enthusiastic postcard that just said, "Today I saw a seagull steal a donut. I thought of you." He always knew how to make you laugh when you were teetering. You run your fingers along the next paragraph, where you'd written about the heat, the way the city shimmered with it, how even your sheets felt too warm to sleep in. I started putting your letter under my pillow, you'd confessed, like some grown-up version of a teddy bear. Don't get a big head. A breeze moves through the garden now, rustling the roses, stirring the air like a whispered, "I remember." It wasn't an easy summer. You'd never admit it to him back then, but being apart hurt more than you expected. Not in some dramatic, sobbing on the floor way. Just a quiet ache, a steady missing that threaded through your days like a fine wire. You functioned, you smiled, you grew tomatoes. But there was always a part of you slightly out of focus. The garden around you now seems to echo that emptiness. The gaps where flowers once bloomed, the stones shifted just enough to trip you if you're not looking. And yet, in its wildness, it's still beautiful, overgrown with memory. You read the last few lines of the letter aloud, your voice soft. I don't need you every second. That's not what love is. But I want you in the background of everything, like sunlight in a room, like the hum of bees, like something that makes everything else make sense. You pause. There's a lump in your throat, and you try to cough it away. Doesn't work. You press your palm over your heart like that might steady it. It doesn't. That summer taught you a lot. About love, yes, but also about how distance doesn't always mean disconnect. Sometimes love stretches. It doesn't snap. It grows elastic, stronger, like those weird climbing roses he bought that one year, resistant, stubborn, always reaching for the light. You remember when he came home, how he smelled faintly of salt and printer ink, how his arms felt too tight around you, like he was afraid you'd dissolve. You hadn't even gone inside yet. You kissed him right there on the sidewalk, between the potted basil and your neighbor's yapping chihuahua. It wasn't a movie moment. You'd both started crying halfway through the hug and he got snot on your shirt. Still, it felt like something holy. You tuck the letter back into its envelope, careful to smooth the crease. Then you slide it under the others, like it's always been waiting to be remembered. Your knees complain again as you shift. The stone is getting cold beneath you, and the smell of earth is sharper now, more alive. The garden is awake with night sounds, crickets, the low hum of wind in the trees, a distant hoot you refuse to acknowledge again. You run your fingers through the dirt beside the tin, letting it sift through your hands. The soil here always had good drainage. You'd insisted on that when you first planted the roses. No point in beauty if it drowns, you'd said. He'd rolled his eyes. That's not ominous at all. You smile. Somewhere under all this dirt and memory, you realize, is a love story told in layers, in pencils and petals, postcards and punchlines, absences and returns, and the letters. They're just the breadcrumbs, the map back to it all. The wind picks up slightly. You pull your cardigan closer and lean forward, brushing the dust from your palms, ready to open the next piece of your heart. The fourth letter is thinner than the rest. Just a single page, no envelope, folded twice and tucked carefully between two thicker ones, like it needed their protection. The creases are deep, well-loved, often read. You recognize it instantly. You wrote this one on the day you moved in together. You sit up straighter. Your knees crack. The garden doesn't judge. That morning comes rushing back. Boxes everywhere. Your kitchen utensils stuffed inside his guitar case. A sock hanging off the edge of a lampshade like it was trying to escape adulthood. The apartment was barely a home yet. All dust and echoes and paint that hadn't fully dried. But it was yours, together. You'd taken a break from unpacking to scribble that letter on the back of an old paper bag. No real reason, just too many feelings. You didn't know what to do with them, so you wrote. And now here it is, years later, coming back to you like a boomerang made of sentiment and poorly hidden panic. I thought I'd be terrified, you wrote. And I am, but in a good way, like the roller coaster kind. Like maybe this is what love is supposed to feel like. Messy, hopeful, full of dropped mugs and mismatched plates. You chuckle softly. That first week was chaos. You fought about the stupidest things. How he stacked the dishes. Your obsessive labeling system for the spice rack. His inexplicable resistance to owning a laundry hamper. And yet, every argument ended the same way. Slumped on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that was too small for two, both of you too tired to care, but still reaching for each other. The letter continues. There's a joy in the ordinary I'm starting to realize. In your toothbrush next to mine. In the way your shoes never quite make it to the rack, but I secretly like seeing them there. It's like your presence lingers even when you're not in the room. You pause, glancing over at the old stone path you laid together out here. He swore he could do it without instructions. You both ended up covered in mud, swearing at YouTube tutorials, and laughing so hard you cried. You rub your shoulder at the memory. It still aches when it rains. A small souvenir. The garden feels warmer now, like it's leaning in, listening. You wonder how many of these flowers were planted during that first spring in the new apartment. You remember dragging bags of soil up the stairs, arguing over whether to get dahlias or roses. You won, obviously, and how he insisted on naming every single plant like they were adopted children. Margaret the basil, Steve the geranium. He had a soft spot for naming things. You turn back to the letter. I don't know what forever looks like, you'd written. But if it includes shared takeout containers and fighting over the good side of the bed, I'll take it. You're the only one I want to be bored with. God, you were poetic when you were half exhausted and in love. Or maybe it just feels that way now. Time has a way of gilding everything with memory. You remember how quiet that first night was. The kind of quiet that makes you aware of every little creak and groan of a new place. You'd both lay there, wide awake, pretending to be asleep, until he finally whispered, "Do you think the people below us can hear us breathing?" And you'd burst into laughter, all the tension breaking like a snapped rubber band. You smile now, pressing the paper bag letter to your chest. You can still feel that nervous excitement, the thrill of building a life from scratch, not from a blueprint, but from sheer, stubborn love. The wind lifts the edges of the paper like it, too, wants to reread your younger self's hopes. You let it flutter a moment, then fold it back up with care and return it to the tin. You stretch out your legs, flexing your toes against the garden path. A beetle stumbles past, thoroughly unimpressed by your nostalgia. You have no idea, you murmur to it. The moon is brighter now, draped in gauzy clouds. The garden hums with life. Vines curling around trellises, moths floating lazily from bloom to bloom like drunk ballerinas. You run your fingers over the rim of the tin and glance down at the next letter, its blue ink peeking from the torn edge of the envelope. You remember writing it in the middle of the night, hunched over the kitchen counter while he snored softly in the next room. You'd written it after your first real scare, the kind of fight that made you question whether love could ever be simple. It wasn't. It never would be. But what you learned that night made everything after stronger. You blink, surprised at how much you still feel it. The heart-pounding fear, the clumsy apologies, the fierce relief of not giving up. But that's for the next letter. For now, you rest your palm over the tin like a lid on a simmering pot. It's strange, you think, how much love lives in the margins, in forgotten bags, mismatched socks, grocery lists scrawled in a hurry. You didn't need a big house or perfect routines, just each other. And maybe a working laundry hamper, eventually. You lean back on your hands, the roses swaying around you like silent witnesses. Some of them you planted together. Some he planted when your back went out that one spring. Some you're fairly certain just showed up, like love, like him. You whisper into the dark, "We were a mess." Then you smile, "But we were our mess." The fifth letter is heavier, not in weight, but in the way it settles in your hand. The envelope is crumpled at the corner, stained slightly where you once spilled coffee on it. You remember exactly when you wrote it. It was the night you thought everything might break. You don't want to go back there, not really. But stories, even the soft ones, need their shadows. And love, real love, is not without its low notes. You unfold the letter carefully, the paper sighing in your hands like it's relieved to be touched again. The ink is smudged in places, your own handwriting shaky. It had been a fight, one of those long looping arguments that starts about something small, like forgetting to lock the door or leaving the stove on, and spirals into everything, every buried resentment, every swallowed frustration. You'd stood in the kitchen, your voice rising with each sentence, while he leaned against the counter, arms crossed, silent in that infuriating way he had when he was trying not to say something he'd regret. And then, at some point, it cracked. Not the fight, the silence. He said, "Maybe we're not good for each other." You'd gone still. Completely still. Like someone pressed pause. That sentence, 7 words, rattled your bones. You remember looking at him, eyes wide, feeling like you couldn't find the floor. It wasn't just the fear of losing him. It was the fear that maybe you already had. You didn't talk after that. Not for hours. You curled up on the couch, not crying, just numb. And somewhere in that space, that stunned quiet, you picked up a pen. Not to fix anything, just to speak without pressure. You wrote the letter because your voice wouldn't come out. "I don't know how to undo what just happened," it starts. "I don't even know how we got here, but I know what I don't want. I don't want a world where your toothbrush is gone, where your socks aren't on the floor, where I stop making 2 cups of tea just in case." You breathe out slowly now, reading it again. It still catches in your throat. Love isn't just made in sweet letters and date nights. It's made in the hollow, aching pauses, in the stubborn choice to stay. The letter goes on. "I'm angry. I know you are too. But under that, under all the armor and defensiveness, I'm scared. Scared because I love you so much, it feels ridiculous. And if we lose each other over a door or a tone of voice or who always does the dishes, then we've misunderstood what this whole thing is about." You pause, brushing your thumb over a faded ink smudge. A tear, probably. You'd been crying when you wrote it. Not loudly, just enough for your breath to shake. "I don't want perfect," you'd written. "I want real, and real is messy. Real fights, real apologies, real hands still reaching even in the dark." You remember that you left the letter on the pillow and went to bed without saying a word. He found it the next morning. You woke up to the smell of pancakes. He was in the kitchen, already dressed, like it was any other Saturday. You stood in the doorway, eyes puffy, and he turned and simply said, "Still want to try?" You did. Of course you did. You tucked that letter away, not because it hurt, but because it mattered. It marked the moment you both stopped pretending everything had to be easy. It was your contract. Not legally binding, but soul binding. In the garden now, the silence holds you like a warm shawl. This is the letter that shaped everything after. Not the romantic ones, not the flirty postcards. This one. This hard, raw, trembling confession of fear and hope and the desperate, unfinished nature of real love. You look around at the blooms. Some are closed for the night. Others, moonflowers and jasmine, open wide in the dark. Not every flower needs daylight. Some bloom because of the night. It's funny how people think love is about compatibility, like it's some puzzle where the pieces fit perfectly. But you know better. Love isn't about fitting, it's about holding, even when the edges are rough, especially then. You tuck the letter back into the tin, gently, like putting a baby down to sleep. And now you're thinking of all the nights after that, the quiet reassurances, the in-jokes that came back, the way his hand would find yours without thinking. You didn't fix everything in one letter, but you remembered how to listen, how to soften. You shift on the stone and hear it creak. Or maybe that's your knees again. Either way, you smile. That fight was years ago. And still, this letter feels fresh. Maybe because the hardest parts of love don't age, you just grow better at carrying them. You glance at the garden bench under the archway, where you'd once sat together, sipping tea. pretending you were the kind of people who could keep plants alive without supervision. He never got over watering. Every plant was thirsty, apparently. You shake your head fondly. The garden's wild now, but it's still yours. Still his. Every weed and bloom carries a memory. And somehow, that mess, the untamed, the overgrown, the tangled, is the most beautiful part. You close your eyes, breathing in the scent of damp petals and warm earth. You're ready for the next letter, the one that came after the healing, after the hard truths, the one that reminded you joy was still possible, that love, when tended, grows stronger through its breaks. You place your hand over the tin like a promise. Still want to try? Always. The sixth letter is written on a napkin, one of those thick, clothy ones from that tiny restaurant you both loved, with the mismatched chairs and the server who always called everyone Hun. You'd gone there after a long day at the DMV of all places. Nothing romantic about bureaucracy, but somehow that night became a quiet turning point. You smile as you unfold it. The ink has bled slightly through the fabric, but the words are still there, slanted and smudged like you wrote them quickly, half laughing over dessert. It had been raining that day, like biblical raining. Your umbrella turned inside out before you even got out of the car. You were both soaked. Your appointment was delayed 3 hours, and you were pretty sure the woman at the counter was actively trying to dissolve your will to live. By the time you left, your socks had formed their own climate zone, and your patients had filed for divorce. He was the one who suggested the restaurant. "We need pancakes," he'd said, with the solemn authority of a man who'd reached the end of his emotional rope and decided syrup was the only cure. And he was right. You sat by the window, dripping rainwater onto the floor, laughing at how miserable you looked, and ordered the biggest stack on the menu. And then you wrote the napkin note. Just a little love letter in the middle of an ordinary mess. "This isn't glamorous," it begins. "It's not candlelight or violin solos. It's soggy shoes and borrowed hoodies and your hair doing that thing it does when you've given up on appearances entirely." You snort. That thing your hair did? That was affectionately known as the swamp witch phase. Not your finest look, but he'd loved it. The note continues. "But there's something holy about today. Something weirdly sacred in the way you reached across the table and stole my last piece of bacon, and I let you. Because loving you doesn't always look like roses. Sometimes it looks like pancakes and damp sleeves and choosing each other even when everything smells faintly of mildew." You remember how he laughed when he read it, how he folded the napkin neatly and slipped it into his coat pocket like it was gold. He always said love wasn't about the big declarations. It was about showing up on DMV days, about who you'd choose when the mood lighting is fluorescent and everything is just a little gross. The napkin had stayed in his coat for months. Every time he wore it, you'd ask, "Still carrying my masterpiece?" And he'd reply, "It's a limited edition," always with that sly grin. You trace the edge of the cloth now, remembering the exact feeling of that day, the lightness, the way something so annoying turned into a memory you kept returning to, not despite the frustration, but because of it. That was your alchemy, turning soggy into sacred. And isn't that the whole point? Not just surviving the storm, but finding the booth with the sticky table and the griddle still warm, and saying, "This is good enough. More than good enough. This is ours." You look around the garden now, and you swear the flowers are leaning in, curious. Even the roses seem less prickly in the dim light. A breeze stirs the leaves, gentle as a lullaby. You remember, too, how he'd read the napkin letter out loud one night, years later, during an argument that had nothing to do with pancakes. You once said DMV days were sacred, he'd reminded you, holding it like a shield. I think today counts. And somehow, that softened everything. Because love isn't just about remembering the sweet things. It's about using them, returning to them when the map gets blurry. You set the napkin gently back into the tin. The cloth is faded now, but the sentiment is fresh. Like how certain songs still make you tear up no matter how many years pass. Like how the smell of syrup can make you feel 16 kinds of nostalgic at once. You look up at the stars, finally peeking through the clouds like shy dancers. The night is humming. Not loudly, just enough to remind you that the world is still spinning, even as you sit here, in the cradle of memory. You think about all the little artifacts of your love scattered across time. A shoelace he replaced when yours snapped. The old voicemail where he sang off-key just to make you laugh. The shopping list where he added emotional stability between eggs and oat milk. This napkin joins that gallery now. Not a grand gesture, but a real one. And maybe that's the quiet miracle of love. It doesn't need an audience. Just a booth, a storm, a soggy sock or two, and someone who will still split their pancakes with you when they're starving. You take a deep breath. The kind that fills you up instead of emptying you out. You reach for the next letter, its edges crisp. You remember this one too. It was written after a trip. One of those rare weekends where you got away from the noise and just existed. You're smiling already. But that's for the next page. For now, you close your eyes and rest your hand on the tin, feeling its weight, its warmth. So many stories inside one small box. Love is sacred on DMV days, you whisper, and the garden seems to agree. The 7th letter comes in the form of a postcard, creased in the middle, corners softened from time and touch. It's from a trip you took together. One of those last-minute escapes with no real itinerary, just a borrowed car, an overnight bag, and the quiet hunger for a change of scene. The image on the front is a watercolor painting of a lighthouse, standing bold and chipped against a cloudy sky. You'd found it in a gift shop next to some extremely judgmental seagulls and a rack of keychains that squeaked when you pressed them. Naturally, you bought 3. But it was the postcard you held on to. You flip it over and smile at the rushed scrawl, the ink slightly blurred by salty fingers. You wrote it while sitting on the hood of the car, parked crooked near the dunes, your back warm from the sun, the ocean stretching out like an unfinished sentence. Wish you were here, you wrote to him, even though you're literally 6 feet away stealing my Pringles. It was a joke, sure, but it was also the truth. Even when he was right there, close enough to feel the heat of his body, to hear him humming through his nose while he watched the waves, you still missed him. Or rather, you longed for more of him, always. Even when he was right beside you, It never felt like quite enough. That trip was magic, but not because it was perfect. You both got sunburned. He lost a sandal to an especially aggressive tide, and you accidentally booked a motel that turned out to be, let's just say, ambiance challenged. The wallpaper peeled with a quiet menace. The bed squeaked if you blinked, and you're 97% sure something growled under the sink. Still, you laughed more in that one weekend than you had in months. Maybe because you had no cell reception, or maybe because the ocean has a way of making everything feel smaller and more manageable, like grief in reverse. He'd walked with you down the shoreline, holding your shoes, your hand, and an unopened juice box you'd inexplicably insisted on bringing. Emergency citrus, you'd claimed. I don't make the rules. That night, you stood barefoot in the dark, letting the cold tide rush over your ankles. He wrapped a towel around your shoulders and whispered, "We should run away more often." And maybe you should have. But you didn't need to. You were always able to bring pieces of those runaways back with you. Like this postcard. Like the smell of his sunscreen lingering on your hoodie. Like the way you never saw a lighthouse again without thinking, "He'd say it looks judgmental, wouldn't he?" The letter on the back, because you'd turned the postcard into one, ends like this. "I think the best kind of love doesn't always need grand plans, just a horizon, a snack, and someone who gets your weird. You're my weird, and my always." You fold the postcard between your fingers like a prayer. It's the shortest letter, barely 100 words, but it carries the lightest feeling, not giddy, not floaty, just free. The garden rustles around you, the night air cooler now. A breeze brushes your skin and brings the salt of memory with it. You can almost hear the gulls again. Not the poetic kind, just squawky, entitled birds looking for a French fry. That's the thing no one tells you about love. It's not just the candlelit moments. It's sand in your hair and melted chocolate in your purse. It's snack negotiations and shared towels. It's being deeply irritated by someone, while simultaneously never wanting to be anywhere they aren't. You pull the postcard closer, tapping your thumb against the stamp. It's faded, but still shows the lighthouse. A little bent, a little stubborn, still standing. That's you too. A small part of you wonders if anyone else has ever felt this exact ache, missing someone you lived your entire life beside, missing the echo of laughter, the weight of inside jokes, the reliable comfort of knowing exactly how much pepper he'd add to his eggs. Hint, it was always too much. But you don't cry. Not this time. This letter is buoyant, a floating thing. He used to say you were his lighthouse, someone who never moved but always helped him find his way back. You'd roll your eyes, of course, but your heart always glowed a little brighter afterward. You glance up at the stars again. They seem further away now, but clearer somehow. That's what memory does. Stretches and sharpens, smooths the edges. You put the postcard back into the tin, where it nestles between the napkin and the apology letter. Like a joke told between tears. The best kind of humor, really. You shift your legs, joints creaking, and think about how many people miss out on love because they think it's supposed to be serious all the time. They miss the goofy bits, the playful nonsense, the snack-stealing seaside chaos that glues it all together. You know better. You loved him for his patience and his kindness, sure, but also for the way he'd name every pigeon you saw, for his terrible impressions of celebrities you couldn't identify, for how he always made up facts with complete confidence, like, did you know ducks were originally called sky potatoes until 1842? He was your safe place, but he was also your amusement park. And this postcard, that tiny square of ink and salt and sun, is the ride you can still climb aboard when the days get too quiet. You reach for the next letter, fingertips tingling. It's one you haven't read in years, one you barely remember writing, which means it's time. But for now, you whisper, "You're my weird," and smile into the stars. The 8th letter is on plain notebook paper, lined, torn from a spiral, one of the edges still curled where it was ripped too quickly. No stamps, no napkin charm, no whimsical lighthouses, just paper and pen, and a kind of honesty you didn't always let yourself write. You hesitate before opening it. This one's heavier. You remember writing it late at night, alone, with the TV low and the house too quiet. Not in sadness, not entirely, but with a weight pressing against your chest that only words could lift. You'd written it not to give, not to bury in the garden, but just to get it out. And still, somehow, here it is, in your tin, tucked away like it knew it belonged here all along. You unfold it, and the first line makes you sit back. I don't feel like a good partner tonight. You pause. It's a jarring opening, but it's true. You remember that exact feeling, like you were a cracked vase pretending to hold water, smiling through the leaks. That night had been long. Maybe a fight, maybe just one of those emotional whirlpools where everything felt simultaneously too much and not enough. I snapped at you about the dishes. It continues. I rolled my eyes when you asked if I needed anything from the store. I was quiet when I should have said I love you, and loud when I should have listened. It stings to read. You don't like remembering yourself like that, but you also know, deep down, that love isn't proven on your best days. It's forged in the murky middle, the messy parts, the part where you wrote, I don't want to be adored only when I'm patient, soft, and glowing with affection. I want to be loved when I'm jagged, when I'm bitter and tired and wearing the same sweatpants for 3 days in a row. You exhale slowly. The paper flutters, like it's nodding in agreement. He never asked for perfection. You knew that. He never even asked for politeness, really. What he asked for, what he gave, was presence, even when things weren't pretty, especially when they weren't. You'd written, tonight, I'm writing this instead of saying it out loud, because I know I'll try to fix it in the morning with pancakes or a joke or that weird shoulder massage move you pretend to like. But for now, I just want it on paper. I see where I went wrong. I know you didn't deserve my sharpness, and I love you more than I know how to say. And then, scribbled below that in slightly messier ink, P.S. I hid a chocolate bar behind the oatmeal. You earned it. You laugh. Even in self-repair, you couldn't help but tuck in a treat. He always found it too. Not because your hiding spots were good, but because he knew where you'd look if the roles were reversed. Behind the boring stuff. Behind the dry flakes and health kicks and compromise. That's where you kept sweetness. You let the letter rest in your lap and look out at the garden. The moon is higher now, bathing the roses in silver. You see the petals glisten, tiny beads of moisture catching the light. Not dew, just time. Time doing what it does. You think about how often we believe love should look like romance novels, sparkling banter, breathless declarations, dramatic reconciliations under stormy skies. But the truth is far more radical. Love is surviving your worst day without fleeing the room. It's sitting on the couch in a silence thick enough to cut, and still reaching out with one finger to touch their sleeve. He never weaponized your bad moods, never stored them up like little debts to be repaid later. He accepted them like weather, passing storms, occasionally loud, but never permanent. And in return, you learned to soften. You became someone who could write a letter like this and not tear it up. That alone is its own kind of love story. You smooth the paper, folding it with care. This one is sacred in a different way. Not joyful, not nostalgic, but real, solid. It reminds you that grace doesn't arrive like a bouquet. It shows up like a single breath when you didn't know you needed one. Like a quiet, "I know," at the end of an argument. And maybe that's why you buried it in the garden. Because gardens don't just need sunshine, they need rain. And this letter is rain, cleansing, necessary, not always welcome, but always needed. You tuck it back into the tin and reach for the next envelope. This one is oddly shaped, longer than the others. You know instantly what it is. A list. You feel your chest tighten, but not with grief, with warmth. The list he made the year you turned 60. 60 things I love about you. You hadn't expected it. You'd told him not to make a fuss. He predictably ignored you, and you're so glad he did. But that's for the next section. For now, you let yourself feel the weight of this one. I don't feel like a good partner tonight, you'd said. And still, here you are, still loved, still remembered, still resting in a garden you made together, letter by letter, seed by seed. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you can feel his hand on your knee again, the way he squeezed once when he didn't have words, the way you squeezed back. The 9th item in your tin isn't a letter, not exactly. It's a list, folded like a road map, creased and softened from being opened and reread so many times. 60 things I love about you, written in his unmistakable chicken scratch handwriting. Each item numbered carefully, sometimes squeezed into the margins when he got carried away. He'd given it to you on your 60th birthday, tucked between 2 slices of burnt toast and a cup of coffee with exactly 1.5 sugars, because he always forgot the half and then tried to compensate with charm, which, to be fair, often worked. The paper still smells faintly of maple syrup and lemon lotion somehow, like a morning you want to live inside. You unfold the list, and the numbers tumble across the page like a stream of affection with no filter. He didn't try to make it poetic. He didn't need to. It was all heart. 1. The sound you make when you taste something too hot, but pretend it's fine. 2. The way your hands look when you're planting dirt royalty. 3. How you hate onions, but tolerate them for me. 4. Your weird vendetta against decorative pillows. You pause there, smiling. That one still makes you snort. You'd had an unspoken war in your home about throw pillows. How many were too many, whether they were necessary for aesthetic balance, and why anyone would need a pillow that said, "Live, laugh, love," in glitter script. You lost that battle eventually. He started hiding them in the linen closet just to mess with you. You continue reading. 8. How you dance when no one's watching, and how you still dance when someone is. 12. Your sneezes. They sound like small, polite earthquakes. 15. Your loyalty to that one mug with the chipped handle. It's clearly cursed, but you insist it has character. There's something so tender in the ordinary. He didn't list your achievements or accolades. He didn't praise your career or your cooking, although both, you'll admit, deserved their own list. Instead, he noticed the things most people wouldn't. Like number 21, the way your voice changes when you're reading out loud. You get softer, like you're afraid the words might bruise. And number 27, you always leave a light on when I'm coming home late. That's not small, that's love. It strikes you, reading now, how he built his affection out of attention. Not grand gestures, but presence. You skim down to the last ones, remembering how he started running out of space and crammed them in with smaller and smaller script. 58. Your stubbornness, equal parts annoying and noble. 59. That you let me love you, even on your stormy days. And finally, 60. You're the home I didn't know I was looking for. You sit very still. That one lands like a heartbeat echoing in an empty room. You were his home, and he was yours. The house, the garden, the life. It all stemmed from that. You refold the list, pressing the creases flat, even though they'll never really stay. And that's okay. Nothing worth holding ever stays neat. It crumples, wrinkles, ages, just like you. You look around the garden, whispering a few of the list items aloud. The wind tugs at your words and carries them off. Maybe he hears them, maybe not. Either way, it feels good to say them again. You remember teasing him after he gave you the list. You really put my sneeze on there? He grinned. What, you think I'm gonna lie to you on your birthday? You shake your head. That's the kind of love that doesn't get written about enough. The kind that notices your sneeze, that remembers your mug, that leaves the hallway light on, without fail, even when it's 2 a.m. and they're tired too. You reach into the tin and pull out the envelope that had been tucked underneath the list. It's addressed to the days we didn't get right. You run your thumb across the ink. This next one, this one's the harder kind. The kind that still stings. A letter about regret. But before you dive into it, you linger here, just a little longer, with the list. You whisper a few more. 33. The way you whisper my name when you think I'm asleep. 39. Your laugh when something really catches you off guard, like a balloon popping or a goat on a trampoline. 50. You always kiss me like it's the first time, and sometimes like it's the last. You hold that last one for a long moment, because love, at its best, exists in both of those places. The thrill of the beginning, and the ache of knowing it doesn't last forever. You fold the list one last time and tuck it gently into the tin. It belongs there, Among the regrets, the apologies, the laughter, the silence. It's a snapshot of love in its most detailed form. Seen, counted, cherished. And now, you're ready to open the next letter, the one where the days didn't go as planned. But just before you do, you murmur, "I hope I made a list for you too." And in your heart, you know you did. Every kind word, every meal cooked just the way he liked, every quiet act of care when no one was watching. You made your list too. It just never needed numbers. The envelope feels heavier than the others, not in weight, but in presence. You recognize the handwriting instantly. It's yours, only this one is different. You labeled it, "To the Days We Didn't Get Right." It's the kind of title that makes you sit a little straighter, even here in the moonlight, even with age pulling at your spine. It's not dramatic, not angry, but it's honest. You always knew how to be honest when it mattered most, even if it took you a few drafts. You unfold the letter slowly. The paper is soft, worn. You must have read this one before, maybe more than once, maybe on rainy mornings, or after the kind of arguments that leave two people sitting in different rooms, wondering what went wrong and who should speak first. It begins plainly. "I wish I knew how to fix the days that frayed at the edges." That's it. No "dear you," no "my love," just the quiet ache of wanting to undo the things time won't return. You keep reading. Some days were loud with tension, not even fights, just static, a humming, a low-grade impatience that made the house feel smaller. We didn't always know how to diffuse it. You'd clench your jaw. I'd retreat into busy work. The tea would steep too long. The toast would burn. And we'd let a silence settle in like fog. You remember those days. Of course you do. You don't try to pretend they didn't happen. You just wish they hadn't lasted quite so long when they did. But you also remember that you always came back to each other. You never stayed mad, not really. You might have withdrawn to your corners, him with a crossword puzzle, you with some plants in dire need of repotting. But there was always a reconnection, a shoulder bump in the hallway, a shared blanket on the couch, a soft, late night, "Still mad?" and an even softer, "Not really." The letter continues. "I think we both expected more of ourselves sometimes. Expected to be the perfect couple everyone thought we were. But love is not perfection. Love is what survives the imperfections. Love is the sigh at the kitchen sink that turns into a back rub, the half-hearted apology over mismatched socks, the decision to stay even when leaving would feel easier in the moment." You pause and smile. You remember that sock fight. You had accused him, half joking, fully annoyed, of sabotaging your sock drawer. He retaliated by stuffing his mismatched ones into your shoes. The cold sock war of 1987, a classic. "Do you remember the day the blender exploded?" the letter asks, as if it can read your mind. You burst into quiet laughter. "Oh yes, yes you do. Strawberry smoothie, ceiling, everything." He stood there, frozen, pink flecks in his eyebrows, and you'd tried to stay mad. You really had. But then he said, "Well, guess the ceiling was thirsty." And that was it. You lost it. The two of you laughed until your sides hurt. Even the bad days had bright edges, didn't they? You read on. "I regret not always saying sorry first. I regret the time I said, 'You just don't understand me,' when what I meant was, Please try again. I need you to understand me more than ever. That sentence cuts a little. You remember the exact moment you wrote it. You'd been hurt. He hadn't understood something that felt important to you. And instead of asking him to lean in, you pushed him away. But even then, he didn't leave. He sat next to you on the edge of the bed, silent, waiting. And eventually, you talked. That was the rhythm of your marriage. Missteps, pauses, then returning. Always returning. I wrote this letter because I want the garden to hold more than love stories and soft petals. The letter says, I want it to hold the truth. That we didn't always get it right, but we never stopped trying. That matters. You let the letter rest in your lap. Your hands ache a bit. These days they always do when you grip something too tightly. You flex your fingers gently like uncurling a flower. Truth matters. That's what this letter reminds you. That love doesn't need to be spotless to be sacred. The frayed days, the stubborn hours, the occasional slammed cabinet doors, they're part of the whole thing. You don't edit them out. You let them breathe. You let them compost into wisdom, just like the garden. He never held grudges. Not real ones. He'd pout maybe, or mutter something under his breath that sounded vaguely Shakespearean. She doth vex me. But by the end of the night, he'd always find his way to your side. That kind of devotion doesn't show up in greeting cards. But it's the foundation of everything. You think of how much you learned from those imperfect days. How much quieter your heart became when you stopped chasing flawless and started appreciating real, messy, human. You whisper to the roses, I'm sorry too. Maybe it's for a specific thing. Maybe not. Maybe it's just something that needed to be said aloud, so the petals can carry it back to him, like a prayer made of soil and wind. You fold the letter slowly, reverently, and slide it back into the tin. The next one is brighter. You can tell from the color. It's blue. A shade he loved because it reminded him of seaside postcards and cloudless skies. It's one he wrote to you. One you didn't know he'd ever written, not until after. And as you reach for it, your heart lifts just a little. There are more love stories here, even after the frayed days, especially after them. The blue envelope is thinner than the rest, like it's hiding something delicate inside. You take a breath and gently loosen the seal, careful not to tear the paper. The name on the front is in his writing, slanted to the right, a little uneven, as always. He never had a gift for penmanship, but he had a gift for meaning everything he wrote. This one simply says, in case you're still here. You don't recognize it. You didn't know this letter existed. He must have written it in secret, stashed it among your things like a time capsule for a moment just like this one. A moment where grief isn't sharp, but soft, worn in, familiar, like shoes that still carry the shape of his feet. You unfold the letter and begin to read. Hey love, if you're reading this, it means I didn't outlive you. Which we both knew was likely, considering I never could resist a second helping of sausage gravy, and my blood pressure had the temperament of a raccoon on espresso. You laugh softly, and you swear the garden leans in, listening. But if I know you, and I do, you're sitting somewhere with your hands in the dirt, your heart halfway open, and that thoughtful crease between your eyebrows you swear doesn't exist. You reach up to touch it, still there. I wanted to write you something that wouldn't feel like a goodbye. I hate goodbyes. I always have. Even at airports, even when it's just a see you next week, it's the worst word. It's like closing a book before the story's done. And you and I, we were a series, not a single story. He's right. You weren't just one love story. You were dozens. Tiny novels stitched together by years and routines and the unspoken rhythm of knowing each other so well you could finish each other's dreams, not just sentences. I hope you still talk to me sometimes. The letter continues. Even if it's just a, look at this mess you left me to clean up, or why did you organize the shed like a squirrel preparing for the end times? You always did have a way with commentary. Your chest tightens. You do talk to him, in little ways, out loud sometimes, in sighs, in laughter when the plumbing acts up or when the coffee machine makes that sputtering sound he used to mimic to perfection. I know grief isn't a straight line. It's a pile of laundry you keep tripping over in the hallway of your heart, he writes. Some days you'll be fine. Other days, something silly will break you, like a song, or my old flannel shirt, or that dumb video of the raccoon washing cotton candy. Oh, that raccoon, you murmur, shaking your head. He tried so hard. I don't want you to forget me, but I also don't want you to stop living just because I had to leave first, the letter says next. Grieve me, sure. Grieve until the ache isn't all sharp edges, but promise me you'll still go to the farmer's market, still talk to the hydrangeas, still tell our niece she's being dramatic when she texts you from the next room. You laugh again. Even now, he's still making sure you don't sink too deep. He knew you might. You've always felt things fully, completely, even sadness, even love. The letter goes on, softer now. Plant things, love. Keep planting. It's what you do best. You grow things. And I need to believe you'll keep growing, too. You look around the garden, where new buds have already begun to stretch upward, reaching towards sunlight they haven't yet tasted. You didn't stop. Not really. Even when everything in you wanted to sit still forever, something inside you knew that movement was healing, that planting was prayer. I always knew you'd outlive me, that you'd have to carry both of us somehow. But I also knew you were strong enough to do it. You were always the spine of us, the roots, the reason we lasted as long as we did. You blink fast, brushing something from your cheek. The letter is almost over. You don't want it to end. I miss your voice most, he writes. Even now, imagining you reading this, I can hear the lilt in your words, the slight hitch when you're fighting tears and pretending not to. I loved that voice, every version of it. You stop reading for a moment. Just breathe. He finishes with, I hope you're still here, not just breathing, but living, still watching sunsets and arguing with the news and saving bees from drowning in the bird bath, still writing your little poems in the margins of seed catalogs. He knew, even the things you never told him out loud. He knew. Don't let the story stop here. Keep writing it, for both of us. I'll be reading. There's no signature, just that last line. But you don't need a name to know who wrote this. You've known the shape of his soul for decades. This is him. You fold the letter like something holy, press it to your chest, and sit in the quiet, listening to the leaves rustle like they're clapping in slow motion. You're still here, still growing, still planting, still writing the story, and he's still with you, in the soil, in the wind, in the laughter that sneaks out even when your heart is heavy. You whisper, "Thank you." Then you place the letter carefully back into the tin and reach for the next. You pull the next letter from the tin, this one in a soft lavender envelope, creased at the corners, edges smudged with faint earth stains. The paper smells faintly of old drawer wood and garden mint. There's no date on the outside, just a title in your handwriting. The summer you got sick. For a moment, your hand stills. The words have weight, don't they? Not dramatic, not ominous, just true. That summer changed the tempo of your lives, slowed everything down, rearranged the furniture of your priorities. Some seasons come with fireworks, others with test results and long silences in waiting rooms. You open the envelope. Do you remember how hot it was that summer? You wrote. The air stuck to everything. Even the bees seemed too tired to buzz. And there you were, pale, slow, thinner every week, pretending you were just getting old, like we weren't watching your body stage a quiet rebellion. You remember trying not to panic, how he'd dismiss the bruises blooming for no reason, how you'd press your fingers to his wrist while he slept, counting beats, as if you could monitor his heart into obedience. I knew you were scared. You didn't say it, but I knew. You'd always known. Even before the diagnosis. It was in the way he started double-checking the locks before bed, something he hadn't done in 30 years. The way he flinched when the phone rang. The way he looked at you like he was memorizing you. I hated how polite we became during that time, you wrote. Like we were guests in each other's sorrow. You would ask, "Need anything, love?" And I'd say, "No, all good," even when I was terrified. We tiptoed around the fear like it was a sleeping child. You pause and breathe deep. You can still feel that quiet tension from that summer. How even the wind seemed hesitant to move the curtains. But in between the fear, there were moments of remarkable clarity. You keep reading. Do you remember the night I found you in the garden, just sitting there? You were watching a snail in the patio like it was performing a ballet. I asked what you were doing, and you said, trying to learn how to go slow and still get somewhere. You close your eyes. That line. You'd forgotten it until now, but there it is again, curling around your ribs, wrapping you in the truth of it. I started noticing everything you touched after that. The letter goes on. How you watered the roses like they were made of porcelain. How you peeled oranges in one long spiral. how you made a joke every time you had to go for tests, as if humor could armor the whole damn experience. He hated doctors, always had, and yet he never let that distaste show, not to you, not then. He endured every appointment like it was part of some cosmic checklist, except when they had to take blood. Then he turned into the most dramatic patient known to man. "I'm leaking vital artistic essence," he once told the nurse, hand to forehead like a Victorian ghost. The letter shifts then, from observation to confession. "I wish I had told you more often how brave you were," you wrote. "I was so focused on staying strong, I forgot that vulnerability is its own kind of courage." That part was the hardest, wasn't it? You didn't want to be the scared wife. You wanted to be the strong one. But strength, you've learned, doesn't always mean composure. Sometimes it means holding his hand and letting him see your tears anyway. You remember the first time you cried in front of him that summer? Truly cried. You'd tried to hide it, face in your sleeve, pretending it was a yawn. He just reached out, thumb against your cheek, and said, "Oh, good. I was getting worried. If you weren't crying, I'd think I really was dying." Morbid, but somehow comforting. That was him, turning the unbearable into something oddly manageable. The letter draws toward its close. "You survived that summer," you wrote, "at least for a while. Long enough for us to go apple picking in the fall and burn a pie in October and dance to Nat King Cole in the living room just before your next scan. Long enough for me to memorize the shape of your resilience." You trace your thumb along the signature at the bottom. No name, just the doodle you always drew on his birthday cards, a little rose in bloom. Funny how even letters about illness can glow. That summer could have broken you. In some ways, it did. But it also cracked you both open in ways you didn't expect. You stopped holding in the good things. You said, "I love you," like punctuation. You laughed more, ate dessert first, danced in the garden once under moonlight and 3 citronella candles. You fold the letter gently and return it to the tin, your hands careful, reverent. There are just a few left now. One is tucked in the bottom corner, clearly older, edges curled, like it's been read a dozen times. The ink has faded to sepia, and the paper bears the faint scent of his cologne. Just a wisp of it, like memory in physical form. You recognize it immediately. It's the first letter he ever wrote you. You smile. And already your heart starts rewinding the tape. Back to the start. Back to the garden before it bloomed. Back to when love was still a maybe. You lift the letter. It's time to go back. You unfold the letter with the care of someone handling an artifact from a world long gone. The paper is thin, cheap notebook stock, college-ruled and frayed at the edges. There's a coffee ring in the corner, and a faint doodle of what might be a cat, or a duck wearing boots. You never did ask. And right there, at the top, are the words that made your heart hiccup all those years ago. "Dear future favorite person." You smile instantly, like muscle memory. You know every sentence of this letter by heart. And yet, somehow, reading it now feels like the first time. I didn't know how else to say this without sounding like a teenage boy in a bad romantic comedy. It begins. But I think you're my person. You know, the person. Capital letters and all. You remember how stunned you were when you first read that. You'd only been seeing each other for a couple of months. It was early. Too early, by most standards. But then again, he never cared much for timing. He always said, "Why let clocks decide how we feel?" You continue reading. You make me feel like I've known you in every past life, like we probably fought over whose turn it was to light the fire in a Viking hut, or argued about soup seasoning in a French village in 1742. There it is. His strange theory that you'd always been reincarnated near each other, always slightly out of sync until now. I love how you laugh at your own jokes, and how you talk to dogs like they're old coworkers you bumped into at the store. I love that you alphabetize your spices, but keep your socks in total chaos. It's terrifying, honestly. You snort, loudly, because yes, your sock drawer is still a war zone. And yes, you still talk to dogs like they know your secrets. You didn't know what to do with those words back then. They felt too big, too real. You were still guarding your heart like a squirrel with a nut stash in winter. But he didn't push. He just gave you the letter and told you to read it when you were ready. You keep going. If I'm wrong about this, if you end up hating me, or if we drift or implode, or if one day I do something dumb, like forget your birthday again, just know that in this moment, I meant every word. Every clumsy, mushy, overdramatic one of them. The letter is dated 2 days before your first real fight, the one about whether to move in together. You were terrified. He was patient. And when you stormed out to clear your head, you found this letter tucked in your coat pocket, folded neatly like a peace offering. It worked. You came back. You always did. I don't know what our future looks like, he'd written. But if there's even a sliver of a chance that you're in it, I want to build it with you. Even if it's messy. Even if we burn the soup and argue about whether or not bees have knees. You still don't know if bees have knees. You looked it up once, but forgot. It doesn't matter. What mattered is that he saw your fear and met it with hope. This letter wasn't a proposal. It wasn't a plea. It was a declaration, a brave little announcement that he was choosing you, and if you'd let him, he'd keep choosing you. And you did. You chose him every day after that, even when he left socks on the floor, even when he snored like a cartoon bear, even when he said espresso instead of espresso and swore he was right. You tucked the letter back into its envelope, but not before pressing it lightly to your lips, a kiss across time. This was the beginning. Before vows, before gardens, before grief. It feels good to revisit it now, like stepping into a memory that's still warm. You reach into the tin again. There are only 2 letters left. One is addressed to your husband from you, written sometime in your mid-years, judging by the handwriting. A little looser, a little bolder. The other is unlabeled, folded in half without an envelope. You hesitate. The unlabeled one feels different. But first, the one to him. You wrote it on an ordinary Wednesday, you think. There was no holiday, no milestone. Just a moment when love felt too big to contain. You open it, and you smile. This is the one you want to read aloud next. The letter begins in your broad, swooping script, slanted just slightly, as if the words themselves were leaning in for a hug. You were washing the dishes when I started writing this. You glance up from the paper, amused by your own candor. Of course you began mid-thought. That was always your style. Who needed dear this or my dearest that when the point was to catch a moment in flight? You were humming something under your breath. Was it Sinatra or a jingle from that ridiculous cereal commercial? Either way, it made me stop what I was doing just to watch you. You remember that moment. You had a book in your lap and your feet tucked under you, and he was at the sink with soap suds up to his elbows, narrating a fake cooking show to an imaginary audience. You'd meant to read a chapter, but instead you just watched. Because love isn't always in the grand gestures, it's in the way someone rinses a plate, sings off-key, or wipes their hands before kissing your forehead. Sometimes I forget that this is it, the letter says. This is the life I once daydreamed about. Not a mansion, not a fairy tale, just this. You, our home, slightly crooked, our cat, extremely judgmental, the dinner we forgot in the oven and pretended was crispy on purpose. You laugh softly. You'd really burned that lasagna. The kitchen smelled like regret and oregano for 2 days. You continue reading. I've been thinking about how easily life passes us by, how we think we'll remember every Tuesday just because it was lovely. But we don't, do we? We forget the good Tuesdays unless we write them down. So this is me, writing one down. That's why you wrote this letter. Not because something dramatic happened, but because something didn't. Because you looked across the room at a man you loved, doing something utterly mundane, and your chest swelled so full with it that you needed somewhere for the overflow to land. You told me once that you worry about being boring, that someday I'll realize we stopped having adventures and started having routines. But my love, you are the most magnificent routine I've ever known. And life with you, that's the adventure. He had that fear deep down, that he'd become predictable, that marriage dulled the mystery. But mystery isn't about new. It's about the little revelations in the everyday, like realizing after 20 years that he always takes the corner piece of toast because he thinks you like the center ones more. Or that he memorized the names of all your students, even the ones who only stayed for a semester. You turn the page. I want you to know that if all we ever do is read books on the porch, argue over crossword puzzles, and kiss goodnight with morning breath still on our lips, I'll still count myself the luckiest woman alive. That line still hits you, maybe even more now, because the porch is quieter these days. The crossword sits half-finished most weeks, and no one's been humming at the sink in a while. But this letter brings it all back. I'm writing this because I don't want to wait for anniversaries or illnesses to say it. I love you now, today, in this unremarkable, perfect moment. You pause. Rest your hand on your heart like it might keep the ache from spilling. It's a strange feeling to be comforted by a version of yourself from the past. But that's what this letter is, a gift sent forward in time. A reminder from your younger self that love didn't need fireworks. Just a Wednesday and the sound of someone humming in another room. You fold the letter slowly, as if reluctant to tuck the moment away. And now only one remains, the unlabeled one. You hesitate. There's something sacred about an anonymous letter, even when you recognize your own handwriting. Something final, perhaps, or confessional. The paper is thicker than the others, cream-colored, heavier in your hands. You unfold it gently. No greeting, just words. By the time you read this, I'm probably gone. Your breath catches, or close to it. Either way, I know you. You're probably sitting in the garden. Maybe you're wearing that cardigan with the threadbare elbows. Maybe it still smells a little like me. I hope it does. You don't remember writing this, but you know you did. Every sentence is unmistakably yours, your rhythm, your phrasing, your irreverent warmth stitched with sadness. You keep reading. I always thought I'd go first, but if you're the one still here, then I need to tell you some things. I need you to know that I was never afraid of death. Not really. I was only afraid of leaving you behind. You blink fast, not because you're trying not to cry, but because you want to see every word clearly. I want you to keep planting roses. I want you to dance in the living room, even if your knees crack like popcorn. I want you to laugh at dumb movies and flirt with the pharmacist and eat the good chocolate. I want you to be so full of life that you forget, just for a second, that I ever left. You can't breathe for a moment. This wasn't a love letter. It was a lifeline, a way of saying goodbye without really going anywhere. You don't need to keep reading old letters forever, but if you do, I hope you hear my voice in every line. I hope it sounds like coming home. You gently close the letter. It does sound like home. You fold it, place it back into the tin, and press the lid closed, softly, like tucking someone in for the night. Only one section remains now, just the wind down, the final breath, a slow fade into sleep. You lean back in the garden chair, the air thick with the scent of roses and something more elusive, something like memory, like devotion, like the breath of the one you loved still caught in the folds of this place. The last letter rests in the tin, safely closed. The sun has nearly disappeared behind the trees, the sky stretched with colors you can't name. Orange brushed with old gold, violet muddied by time. Somewhere a bird sings its last song of the day. Somewhere the world goes on unbothered. But here, in this little corner of earth, it all feels suspended. You look around the garden and remember the work you both poured into it. Every plant here tells a story. The climbing rose by the trellis, planted after your first big vacation. The lavender in the corner, he brought it home from a roadside stand because it smelled like you before coffee. Even the wonky herb patch he tried to fix 3 times, each effort slightly worse than the last. You never told him that, of course. It was the thought, and the absolute chaos of his cilantro. You chuckle quietly. This garden isn't perfect. It never was. It's overgrown in parts, sparse in others. There are weeds you never quite got around to pulling, but it's yours and his, built over years, with sweat and laughter, and not a small amount of bickering about mulch. And now it's the resting place for your story. Not just the letters, but the whispers tucked into the soil, the memories tangled in vine and root. You exhale slowly, letting your shoulders drop, letting your chest relax. And then, without really deciding to, you begin speaking softly into the dusk. You were the quiet in my chaos, the cup of tea after a hard day, the old song that always found me when I was lost. The words aren't rehearsed. They don't need to be. They're the kind that live in your marrow. You were never the storm, love. You were the lighthouse. A breeze picks up. It tugs a rose petal loose from its stem, sends it tumbling gently through the air like a note with no destination. You watch it fall, then rest your hand on the old tin box. You don't need to read another letter, not tonight. They've done their work. You've said goodbye before. But this feels different, softer, more like letting go without leaving. You smile, not because you're happy exactly, but because you're full of all the love that once was and somehow still is. It's time now. You stand, joints protesting a little, and gather the blanket draped across your lap. You kiss your fingers and press them to the soil beneath the rose bush. A final touch, a last thank you. The garden glows in the half-light. It'll be here tomorrow, and the next day. You will be too, for as long as you're meant to be. But for tonight, it's time to rest. You walk slowly back toward the house. The screen door creaks just as it always did. The light flickers in the hallway. The cat, now older than sin and crankier than ever, waits by her bowl like you haven't been through something profound. You smile at her too. And when you finally slip into bed, under the quilt you both picked out 20 years ago, when you were younger, bolder, still figuring it all out, you let yourself feel it all. The love, the loss, the laughter. You let it rock you gently, like a boat in a calm sea. You let it carry you home. And now, beautiful soul, let your breath slow. Let the garden fade from view. The roses nodding off under moonlight, their scent softening into dream. Let your hands unclench. Let the letters rest in their box, each one a whisper from another time. Proof that love does not vanish. It simply changes shape. Let your mind soften like evening light over worn stone. You've done enough, felt enough, loved enough. You are enough. You are not alone in your remembering. Somewhere out there, in other gardens, on other porches, hearts like yours are doing the brave work of holding on and letting go at the same time. Tonight, there is no need to make sense of it all. No need to fix, to sort, to solve. Just be. Just float. Let the story wrap around you like a shawl, the words tucking themselves in behind your ears, in the quiet places where healing hums and grief loosens its grip. Let your jaw unclench. Let your shoulders drop. Let the last of the day's noise trickle away, like rain into thirsty ground. You are safe. You are loved. And somewhere, in a place beyond names, someone is still holding your hand. Sweet dreams, beautiful soul.